Greetings and salutations, nerds. You're listening to Praying for Superpowers,
a podcast about the deeper meanings, messages, and intricacies hidden within nerd culture. We're your hosts. I'm Peter Jordahl.
And I'm Trever Shirin. And today we're talking about Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell.
This is my absolute favorite Brandon Sanderson story.
I kind of want to agree.
I mean, I love the rest of his worlds and the rest of his characters. The depth he gets to in 60 pages and the fear and anticipation he builds in paragraphs is incredible. This is kind of his first horror.
Totally.
And it moves like a horror. It doesn't really move like a thriller, but it does get your blood going.
Oh, yeah. And it's based off of Jewish traditions, which is really cool, pulling something from culture into this world and shaping out, like, what if this was true in a different way? Mm-hmm. And those rules are don't light a fire.
Don't draw blood. And don't run at night.
Which, just for you who are watching, we have candles that were lit yesterday.
No. These are drawn from our hearth fire that has been burning since our ancestors arrived here. It's the same fire. We haven't rekindled it.
It has not been. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep.
So, kind of give you a backstory. We assume you're a Brandon Sanderson fan listening to this. It's 60 pages long. It's in his Arcanum Unbounded book, and it's also in a women's short stories anthology that he wrote with George R.R. Martin. So give it a read, and honestly, it's a pretty intense book.
Yeah.
Its basics are that it's this world, Threnody, and there are two continents. And one continent was referred to as Hell, and the other was Earth. And Earth got invaded by demons, and so everyone fled to Hell. And in Hell, there are these ghosts, these specters that haunt the forests and can be driven off by silver. And if you run at night, or kindle flame, or draw blood, these ghosts will descend on you and kill you. Which is terrifying.
Yeah. And they will attempt to kill you even if you are surrounded by silver.
Right.
So one of the ways that you can defend yourself is to line a room or a space with a silver circle.
Silver dust.
Silver dust. And that can protect you. However,
if they keep coming, they will eventually break through the silver.
And burn through the silver, essentially.
Yeah.
So the silver, it gets used in the midst of it. Which I really love this about Sanderson's work, because he's really good at hard magic systems and very limited magic economies. And Shadows is definitely an example of that, where you have the thing that will protect you, but that thing is very valuable, very costly, and gets used very quickly.
Yes, I do love that. Like, silver used to be important, and now it's important for a way different reason, and it's way more important.
Totally.
I just kind of want to give a brief rundown, so you're with us throughout this discussion. Silence is the name of a 40-something-year-old mother, maybe probably 40s.
Yeah.
Brandon says she's middle-aged. She has an adopted daughter and her own daughter. William Ann is her own daughter, and she owns an inn in these forests that are filled with these ghosts. And I can't remember what Sanderson actually calls them. We know that they're cognitive shadows from his expanded universe.
Because this is a world within the Cosmere.
Yeah. So she owns this way stop. It's this inn. It's a safe place. There's lots of silver protecting the people who travel the forests and stay there. But she is secretly a bounty hunter called the White Fox.
Which, can we take just half a second to acknowledge right now, the names throughout this book are incredible.
Silence, William Ann, the White Fox. Theopolis is a tax collector that turns in the bounties she collects for her so she doesn't have to reveal herself. I love the names in this story. And continuing the story, the worst of the worst criminals stops in her inn, and she goes to hunt them because she needs the money, or Theopolis will seize her inn and own her like a slave. And so this whole story, from the rules and the setting that you're set up with Theopolis from the get-go, is intense. This is her last chance.
Yep.
This is a dangerous place. It's an expensive place to live. And on top of all of that, you cannot ever be in a hurry.
Yes.
And I love it. You cannot actually run in this world.
Because that is one of the 3 rules. You will get attacked and killed by these specters if you run. And just so this is why I like the limited economy in Sanderson's book. It's amazing. This is such a limited ability to do anything. And so you put a bounty hunter in the midst of a place where you can't draw blood, in a night when you can't light fire
or use a gun, that using gunpowder counts as kindling fire. So guns don't exist
guns
anymore.
Are out.
Yeah.
You can't run. And so she also cannot kill these evil people in her inn, because she has built for herself this system where her inn is known as a safe place and totally separate from the White Fox. Mm-hmm. And if she was to switch that, nobody would come to her inn anymore. She wouldn't have a livelihood anymore.
Because part of the story of this world is that the only criminals and the really hardened live out in the forests. Everyone else lives in these fort cities that have really high tax rates because their walls are lined with silver.
Yep. And so you have this, essentially you're like, imagine a video game where you're thrown into level 1, you are completely naked, you have no tools, you have 1 hit point, and also all the villains and enemies that are going to attack you when you're level 15 are all around you.
Yeah, and you can't run. Your weapon will quickly degrade when used. And when you use it, will attract more enemies.
Yep.
So
that's kind of the feel you get throughout the story.
Before he even starts with the tense part of the story, it's intense.
Yeah.
And just kind of as a heads up, this story does talk about murder pretty gruesomely. It does talk about rape and a few other things like that. And so go into this warily. Just kind of as a heads up for you out there who are listening.
Yeah.
So the story continues on. Silence and her daughter William Ann, her oldest daughter, go after Chesterton, another great name, and his gang, who have murdered and killed 60 families. So in the forests in this book, that's 4 to 5 people a family. So we are talking about 300 people.
Yep.
This guy killed a governor.
Yep.
And so he's going to die whenever he gets caught. So he has no rules anymore, except for the 3 rules. Yep. Right? So he's a very careful, evil villain. And one of the things that's so driving about this story is Silence's adopted daughter is the only survivor of any of his attacks. Mm-hmm. And so there's so much emotion built into the beginning of this story. She's a widow. And so her daughter is the last memory she has of her husband. And she heads out into the night to catch these murderers.
And this is another moment in the story where we see something that Sanderson does really well, of finding a way to cheat his own system.
Love it.
And so you can't light a fire. You can't do normal tracking things because you're so limited in what you're able to do.
You can't run ahead.
And you
watch
can't
them
chase
from the
after
trees.
them. There's no catching up.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Silence does is she finds this plant, I think, and the extract from it glows. Mm-hmm. And rather than trying to, and that alone is a problem too, because you can't just hide that somewhere,
right?
And then be able to track it. And so she feeds it to the horses who she is keeping care of at the inn. And every time they urinate, it comes out through their urine, and so they have this trail of glowing urine that she is able to follow.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant.
And oh man, and there's no predators in this forest. There's deer and rabbits and stuff, but the shades, Brandon Sanderson's word for these ghosts, have killed all the predators because they drew blood, right?
And ran.
And ran at night. And so all of the wildlife that we ever hear about is docile and slow moving because they have nothing to fear but shades who won't chase them. And so, I mean, he kind of answers all of his own questions, which I love about Sanderson.
Totally.
And Silence and her daughter chase down Chesterton and his gang, and they kill them pretty brutally.
Mm-hmm.
Tar-lined sacks they throw over their head and then stave the head in. None of the blood leaks out, and so it seems like if the blood has to be in contact with the air for the shades to notice. And so she strangles one guy, bashes the head in on 3 others, and then another bounty hunting crew arrives and takes their prize. Who's worth so much, like 2 or 3 years worth of income. And her daughter slowly cut them off and set up like a landmine. Really dangerous to use. Gunpowder with a lighting torch. Because if you kindle fire, all the shades are going to come.
And she does this because she's stuck in a corner where she has no other choice. This is literally their last chance to stay afloat in this forest. And so she is driven to use the most unsafe methods to take out these other bounty hunters.
She sets off this landmine, and so all of the shades nearby, thousands, anyone who dies becomes a shade on this planet, as far as our understanding goes. So there are tens of thousands of shades inhabiting this forest, and they will all start coming as soon as this bomb goes off. And it's kind of like if one of them enrages, which they turn black and their eyes turn red instead of being white with white eyes, other ones farther away notice it. Like, oh man, they're all enraging, we should go join in.
It's like making a really loud noise in a zombie apocalypse. All of the zombies from everywhere else are going to come. Yeah,
it's exactly what it's like. Thank you. They end up stealing the body. Silence fights off 2 shades with her grandmother's silver dagger, who is someone we'll talk about later. And then, but one of the shades gets her arm, and so she starts to wither. So it starts dying, like it's becoming black and losing all of its tissue and blood.
Similar to what we see if your arm is cut by a shard blade.
Right. Yeah, similar to a shard blade cut, that gray lifeless, except it's still usable.
Yes.
But it does lose kind of that use almost.
So now she's in a forest being chased by shades.
With her
daughter. And a silver dagger that's dissolving and down an arm.
Yeah.
Unable to run.
Right. Unable to run with all of these shades killing everybody. They kill indiscriminately. They're not looking for who lit the fire. They're just going to kill.
Yeah. They've been enraged. So now it's kill time.
And it's kill time until everyone is dead.
Yep.
Or they can't find anyone else to kill, and they will slowly reset. No one knows how they reset or how long it takes because no one survives long enough to know. So her daughter pours silver dust on her arm. It starts the regrowing process.
Very expensive silver, very low stock that they brought with them.
And since the daughter is 16, she spills it and uses way too much and heals the wound faster at this. So it only gets harder and worse as it continues on.
Yeah.
And then eventually one of the guys attacked Red, the leader of the rival bounty hunter gang, eventually catches up with them and puts a dagger to William Ann's throat. And then, Silence is trying to think her way through it because if you draw blood, they're all going to die. And then a crossbow bolt with a blunted tip comes out of the darkness and strikes Red on the shoulder. He draws a little bit of blood, and the shades descend. They always look for the one who drew the blood first, so they come after Red. he's withered to dust
Yeah.
as he runs away trying to fight them. William Ann, he shoves through a shade, and so passing through it, she starts to wither and just full on turning into like a Indiana Jones skeleton after the Holy Grail type thing. So now Silence is running with William Ann through the forest.
An arm that's not working.
She is sore from walking slow all night. If you've ever just walked slowly for a long time, it is exhausting. And so she just goes through the forest as fast as she can, dragging William Ann, who's running as much as she can. She's poured what silver she has, trying to save her. Or no, she doesn't. She thinks, this isn't enough.
Right.
I need the silver that's at the inn. And she ends up pouring the silver in a circle on the ground around them, 20 feet from the way stop.
Yep.
Safety is in sight, and she can't do anything about it. And so it's this moment of final despair. Daughter dying in her arms, herself about to be killed as the silver, her last silver around her, is withered to dust. And she prays for the first time in the book. And the whole book, William Ann has been questioning her mother's religion, questioning maybe God is punishing us, and that's why all this is happening. And so then she prays to the God beyond, even though she's been cursing his name. Not cursing his name,
but actively avoiding or pushing away this faith.
Right, exactly. And then she looks up, and there's a crossbow bolt with a silver head in the tree right next to her that her other daughter, Sabruki, accidentally fired when she dropped the crossbow earlier in the story. And so this random thing that happened before is now saving her life. She grabs the crossbow bolt. She gets to the inn. She mostly saves William Ann. You are starting to calm down. You're like, okay, they're alive. She is like, she had to, rock William Ann to sleep. And then Theophilus walks in. And so the bad guy of the book shows up, and they talk for a bit. She's like, it was you. You're the one that shot William Ann in the darkness with the crossbow. You caused the blood to be drawn. And so she figured it out, and that he was trying to get her trapped so that he could own the way stop and basically own her and her children as slaves. And then he breaks one of the 3 rules. And she insults him enough that he smacks her and breaks her lip open, so she bleeds. And he says, she says, Fort City fool, and flicks the blood on his face. And he says, I know we're safe here. And she's like, always follow the simple rules, because if you break them when you're safe, it'll lead to lapses when you're not. And then she opens a cupboard in her house, and in it is the shade of her grandmother, and it eats Theophilus and withers him to dust. And then it doesn't attack her because it knows her. So she gets it back in its silver-lined room she keeps it in, and she turns in. We're almost done, I promise. I'm almost done with the summation. There's so much more that happens in this 60-page book than I remember. And then she is trying to figure out what to do. She now has no one to turn in bounties. Then she decides, I can just pretend that he was the White Fox all along. So she finds his cave where he stays, like a couple miles from the inn, with Chesterton's corpse in it, so she can get the reward. Turns Chesterton in, pretends that Theophilus was the White Fox, and the story kind of comes to a close with her inheriting as herself, so she doesn't have to hide her wealth, this amount of fortune that is kind of unsurpassed in the forests. 6 men ask her to marry them within the week that this happens. And so it kind of wraps up really, really nicely. You don't need to know more of their story. She says she's going to try to find someone to keep turning in bounties, but she's good for 2 years now.
It's very well encapsulated, which is wonderful. And I think it's cool to be able to see Brandon Sanderson, who is known for writing so many pages. Be able to do a 60-page story fully encapsulated that we don't, even though we might want more of the world, I'm okay with not seeing more of Silence.
Yeah, I don't need to see more of Silence or William Mann.
It's really just beautiful. And it is a very satisfying end of tying it all up with a bow and saying, there you go. Happy Halloween.
Yes. Oh, man. So I know that was a long summation, but that is the story. So you didn't have to read it.
Right.
If you did read it, hopefully you skipped ahead to here, as we suggested in the video, as we suggest in the SoundCloud description. And
hopefully that this Worldsinger episode is a good opportunity for you who haven't read much of Sanderson to hear the summation, the little bit of the background, a little bit of the meaning of one of his shorter stories, and see why we love this very creative style of storytelling that's very intricate, very in-depth, has a lot of things weaving in and out of it. And it's cool to be able to see this really small story tie into the rest of the Cosmere, and even show us a little bit more of what the Cosmere is like than we would have known without these 60 pages.
Yeah. I love like how he builds it too. Like he says in his postscript, he's like, I was doing research for genealogy and I found the name Silence. Why would someone want to name their daughter Silence? And he's like, well, I already had this world built. And it seemed like a pretty good world where silence would be important because of the rules. And so like all of this together, and then honestly, my favorite Brandon Sanderson quote or conversation in all of his books is William Mann says to Silence, what would it take you to believe a miracle instead of a coincidence? And she says, well, it would take a miracle and not a coincidence, obviously. Which, to me, is the exact definition of the differences between people that have faith and people that don't.
Yeah.
Is seeing it as a miracle, not a coincidence. And I think he doesn't come out and say it, but I think it alludes to her seeing that crossbow bolt as a miracle.
Right. Not just a coincidence.
Right. It's not like coincidentally her daughter found the crossbow earlier and dropped it and the strap broke and it shot the arrow through the window, past her cheek and into the tree, right where it needed to be to save her life.
Which is obviously a coincidence. It is definable as a coincidence. However, it's also a miracle.
It is a miracle that happened that day.
Right.
Right. Because, I mean, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're okay, I want to keep going. Just
Worldsingers are our episodes. Okay. We can do whatever we want.
Because this whole world speaks of a horror that is no longer what we look for in modern day horror and scare.
Yeah.
You know, like we're looking for the intensity most of the time is what I think people are looking for. And I love the slow pace of this book that is fast paced.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
It's like every step is grueling and dangerous. And like she talks about how she's walking barefoot so she can feel to see if there are like twigs she'll snap and stuff.
And I liked that in Dune as well because he cannot step in a pattern or a rhythm. He has to do this very unrhythmic stepping, otherwise the sandworms will come and kill him. And I think it's at that point when we recognize like, oh, that's really hard to do. Like, because even if you try to walk without rhythm, you're eventually going to be tempted to repeat a pattern. Right. And that's going to be the rhythm. And that will kill you. If you're walking slowly, you're going to get startled. You're going to want to run. And if you do, that's going to kill you. I think it's a beautiful concept.
Yeah, I love it. Do you want to cover how Threnody affects the rest of our knowledge of the Cosmere?
Yeah, I think specifically with the withering, I think it's really interesting with what the shard blades are and how we see that, and this interesting dynamic of the cognitive, the spiritual, and the material planes. We have the cognitive realm, and these shades are pretty clearly stated as cognitive realm beings. And then we've got the spiritual realm, which we're told the Spren are kind of a little bit of a mix of both. And then we've got what we can see, what we can feel.
And is Shadesmar is the spiritual realm?
I think it's cognitive. I might be off on this.
No.
It might... No, we haven't interacted with the spiritual realm yet.
Yeah, that's where Kelsier goes.
That's where Kelsier goes.
In Mistborn Secret History.
Yeah, so we haven't interacted with the spiritual realm. But you see...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
We have.
Oh, well, kind of, but not as much as I'd like to.
Right. Oh, okay.
So you have the Spren in Roshar that are from the cognitive realm and can be seen as similar in type or genus from the Shades. And the Shard Blades are... Shade Blades.
I mean, kind of.
The Shard Blades are Spren. And
manifest in the physical world.
Yeah, and so you see this same concept with the Shades, where you get your arm cut by a shard blade.
You lose all life in it.
You lose all life in it.
It loses color. It's gray.
In the Shades, they touch you and you start to wither away, and it's a slower process.
And it turns black. Yeah.
Which I think is just, it'll be interesting to see how that interacts in the future.
And I'm excited to see someone with black, like a black scarred hand in another world. Totally. Because we'll know they've come in contact with a Threnody.
With like a silver bracelet or something.
No. Love it. I really love how this affects the Mistborn Secret History story.
Oh yeah.
Because they're like one after each other almost in Arcanum Unbounded. And the effect that one has on the other, they talk about the Threnodites coming to get them. And so they have a machine that scans for Threnodites. And it doesn't pick up any because there's none nearby. And that's the Mistborn Secret History, something we'll get into at another time. But the rest of the Cosmere fear these cognitive shadows.
Yep.
So the zombies that Brandon Sanderson has put into his world are what everyone is scared of, which I love. Because they're totally abnormal.
And frightening.
Because if you run from a zombie in any other universe, you get away.
Right.
Because they shamble.
Yep.
Right? Nope. Walk as slow as you can.
Yes.
It's brilliant.
And I like this in Doctor Who with the Weeping Angels. You can't blink.
Yeah.
It's doing something that's so natural and that you really want to do. I don't want to look at you because you're so scary, but if I close my eyes, you're going to kill me. And so this really interesting changing the way we act to defeat the evil. Doing something totally outside of the norm to save ourselves, to be able to get through what's happening. Adapting to this new environment and this new enemy always makes it more interesting because then especially when I was reading this book, I was thinking, okay, how would I do this? How would I do this? And then he does a good job of telling me like, hey, if you did that, you die.
Yeah.
And then what about this? If you did that, that would work. And so it's really cool to be able to insert myself into that world and think, okay, here's my objective. How am I going to do this?
And this is coming back to what you said earlier, the brilliance of Sanderson's well-lined magic systems.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that he can do it in a couple pages.
Oh, yeah.
As well as he does it in a 7-book series in the Wax and Wayne novels.
Yeah.
And the Mistborn novels is incredible. And he's like, you're 5 pages in. You should understand the magic system.
You get it now.
Yep. You hear everything you need to.
Learn how to play with it.
Right. Think through it, and then he explains why you couldn't and why you could do different things.
Yeah. And when he does something that cheats, like the tar-covered bags, it doesn't feel like it undermines or like he is cheating. It's like, you know what? For everything that you've explained to me so far, that makes sense.
Yeah, blood exposed to the air is fine. Or blood exposed to the air is
fine. So, yeah, okay, that works.
Yeah. And then he tells you later, like, it has to be shed in anger. It's like, because people get nosebleeds, people give birth, there is blood in life. And she's like, that's not the problem, which I love.
Yeah. And makes sense if they're cognitive beings, that the intention behind it is something that causes it. It's super interesting. We hope that you've enjoyed this Worldsinger episode. We certainly have. Very different than some of our other episodes. You now may not need to go read the book, but we'd still suggest doing so.
Yeah, we would suggest doing it at night alone in your house in the dark on Halloween.
Absolutely.
That will make it better.
I might be doing that. Thanks for joining us. Check out our website, prayingforsuperpowers.com. We'll be posting something on our discussion boards this week, and we would love to be able to interact with you.
Happy Halloween.